Welcome back. This is the second video of the 12th class for social psychological perspectives on health. In the first video, I started the lecture with a notion that how we could apply the knowledge we have learned through this course into action. And I mentioned three key factors that make group intervention effective. Groups can be effective for our health if they function as a place for communication and contact among members. And if groups function as a place for developing and testing social skills, and if groups provide supportive social environment. And then I gave an example which examined the effectiveness of group intervention. And then we learned that the effectiveness of or effects of group interventions are domain specific. Namely, if the group focuses on remembering the past memories, then they would have more effect on memory performance, while if the groups rather focus more on fun activities, then they would have better impact on well-being. In this video, I will further talk about how we could use group interventions to effectively improve our health. So what form group interventions should take to improve its effectiveness? Groups should have an integrated focus on issues of social process, cognition, and behavior. Sorry, I guess this is more like group interventions should have an integrated focus on issues of social process, cognition, and behavior. And then the textbook argues that missing any one of these would reduce its effectiveness. So basically, groups should be a place for communication. In this sense, it should focus on issues of social process. And then groups should facilitate some thinking as a member of the group. And then also it should facilitate behaviors that are related to others or related to the group. Okay. And then groups should be meaningful. In other words, they cannot be effective if groups are formed based on minimal conditions or minimal attributes. Okay, so we learned in the first or second lectures, there are studies using minimal group paradigms, and then in minimal group paradigms, people were divided into groups based on trivial or arbitrary conditions. But if that is the case, then groups may not be as effective as when groups are meaningful. So groups should have reasons, purpose, or goals that people feel meaningful and relevant to themselves. In that way, people can develop strong identification with the group. And group interventions should be designed with having in mind that social groups affect our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And then meaningful and positive social identifications are key to our social connectedness and health. I guess this point kind of summarizes these 2 points, okay? So in essence, I think, again, this is another recurrent theme that it's not just a membership, but how much, to what extent people can identify with group. That is the key. Okay. The social identity approach to managing social disconnection, origins and theoretical underpinnings of groups for health. So various studies conducted to help vulnerable older adults were reviewed, and most of the studies were reviewed in chapter 7. And the contents of interventions do not but matter, but the increased sense of connectedness and belonging derived from engagement in meaningful group activity produced health effects. Okay, I think I said that in the first video, what we do in the interventions matters. And then it may seem contradicting here, but I think the point here is that whether the intervention can be effective or not depends on the increased sense of connectedness, and then also the increased sense of belonging. Okay, and then interventions still can be domain specific. If they focus on cognitive performance, then the outcome they can get from the interventions would be more related to cognitive functions. And if that is related to other domains, then the outcome they can get from group interventions are also related to those domains. That is, I think, true. But in order for group interventions to be effective, it needs to induce the sense of connectedness and belonging. Okay. And creation and strengthening of social identification are critical to cognitive health, mental health, and well-being. And as you see in the textbook, the way to strengthen social identification is not studied, has not been studied well. There aren't much research on how people can strengthen social identification. But there are some hint I think we can learn from. So what would inhibit social identification? Maybe it is difficult to think of how to strengthen social identification, but there may be some ways not to inhibit social identification. For example, a lack of interest in activities of a group. So when people do not have much interest in activities of the group, then naturally they will not develop strong social identification with the group. I think this is pretty natural and maybe obvious to many people. So for example, if you think about a hobby group, if people are not interested in that hobby, then they are unlikely to identify with that group. Another factor that inhibits social identification may be a change in abilities or motivations. For example, working groups, when older adults are no longer able to walk. So even if people are interested, people are previously interested in working groups, as they get older and then they can no longer walk, then they cannot maintain their motivations to be a member of the group. Another example would be a mental health support group when individuals successfully manage the illness. So working groups example is that when people no longer have ability to be a member of group, but a mental health support group is an example of when people no longer have a reason or motivation to be a member of a group. So there are many reasons like changes in abilities or motivations that make people no longer being interested in groups. And even after they no longer have any abilities or motivations to be in that group, if groups, the groups can be still maintained as a friendship groups. So here it says, if groups no longer have purpose, function, or meaning, it could be a friendship group. But as you may expect, it's not always the case. Oftentimes, when groups no longer have purpose, function, or meaning, people will just leave. They will stop being a member of the group. Okay. And then I think this is often the case for older men. And that is because when they retire their work, their job, they found that they do not have much social groups that they belong. And losing the job or the company that they used to be a part of, they found that they are not really, they have, they would see difficulties in themselves belonging to new groups. So this study particularly look at how older men would be would benefit from being provided groups that they can join. Okay. Title is No Country for Old Men, the role of Gentlemen's Club in promoting social engagement and psychological well-being in residential care. So participants in the residential care were invited to join Gentlemen's Club or Ladies Club for 12 weeks. So basically, all the men were invited to join with Gentlemen's Clubs, while all the women were invited to join Ladies Club. Okay. And then I think it's, as I said, I think it's important to be aware that men are typically a somewhat disadvantaged minority groups in this context. In this context, meaning that means the residential care. Okay, so I think this is because really women tend to be more social and communicative, and that they would more easily, they would more easily create and maintain a group that they can feel being a part of, while men are less skillful at maintaining a group. And this is because, when they were working, the primary reason that they are part of the group was that the company had a purpose or function or meaning to their lives, while women tends not to need those purpose or functions to maintain a group. They can form a group purely, not necessarily purely, but they can form a group that is largely based on the friendship that they have within the group. So this is the result of the study. Okay, so as I said, the study took 12 weeks. So at time one, this is, I think, when the gentleman's club or ladies club was created, and time two is after 12 weeks. So first, let's look at social identity. These arrows indicate that whether the value increased from time one to time two, and then the flat arrow indicates it didn't increase, and that the upward arrow, the arrow pointing to the top, pointing upward, indicates that the value is significantly increased from time one to time two. Okay, and so social identity for the female, well, the numerically it looks like it's decreased. It decreased, but there was no significant difference between time one and time two. So joining to the ladies club did not change their social identity as a ladies club. Who, I mean, 12 weeks, the time of 12 weeks did not change the social identity as a member of ladies club for female. Okay, but for male, the time of 12 weeks made them feel that they developed stronger social identity as a member of Gentlemen's Club. And I think it's important to point out that the initial value is much lower among men than female. So it means that at time one, women participants already developed strong social identification. While at time one, male participants did not develop strong identification, and over the time of 12 weeks, they strengthened their identity. Okay, and ACER is a task to measure their cognitive abilities, and this did not change over 12 weeks. And I think this is pretty consistent with the study I mentioned in the first video. So this gentleman's or ladies' club did not focus on their cognitive performance. Thus, 12 weeks did not make or did not improve their cognitive abilities over time. Life satisfaction, again, female had already high life satisfaction at time one, and that's over 12 weeks. Although it seemed that the numerically the values of life satisfaction decreased, but there was no significant difference. But for male, again, at the initial point, male had very low life satisfaction, and then over the time of 12 weeks, they showed an increase in life satisfaction. And I think this is because they were able to strengthen their social identity over the time. And then as their social identity gets strengthened, their life satisfaction also increased. Furthermore, the depression. So again, female participants did not observe any changes at time one and time two. By the way, for this measure, the lower value indicates that they have less depressive symptoms. Okay. For male participants, again, they have very high depressive symptoms compared to female already at time one. And this value drastically decreased at time two, which is identical to the level of female participants. So again, over the 12 weeks, male participants were able to strengthen their social identity as a member of Gentlemen's Club or as a member of residential care. And because of such increase, male participants showed a dramatic decrease in the levels of depression. Okay, so I think this study demonstrates that it is really how much they can feel that they are a member of group is important for their health. And then, of course, if people have already strong social identity at time one, then they would not observe any differences at time two. But even if they have low social identity at time one, if they can increase their social identity over the time, then such group identification can benefit people by increasing life satisfaction and depression. And then as this intervention was not related to cognitive performance, they did not observe changes in the cognitive abilities. So again, to summarize, it is social identification, the degrees of social identification that change the effectiveness of group intervention. And the effects of group intervention are domain specific, meaning that what they do in the group matters for what kind of outcomes they can get from group interventions. Okay, so I will just keep the rest for the last final class, and then yeah. This is it for today's class. Thank you.